Chapter 4. Lord Odo's previous time away from the Chimera, during his mysterious meeting at the unknown world, had lasted over 5 hours. His visit to Runa had lasted precisely 1. Signal from Lord Odo, Commander, the comm officer announced. The Salaban's Hope has reached docking position and is being tracked aboard. Lord Odo requests that we set a course for the Poln system in the Kandaras sector, and that we leave as soon as his freighter is aboard. Pelion nodded. Navigation? Running the calculation now, sir, the nav officer confirmed. It'll take a few minutes. Acknowledged, Pelion said. Turning, he walked back along the command walkway to the aft bridge and keyed the Poln system into the computer console there. He was skimming through the summary when the turbolift door hissed open and Captain Drewson appeared. Report? Lord Odo is on his way back from Runa, sir, Pelion told him. We're to leave for the Kandaras sector and the Poln system once he's aboard. Kandaras? Leaning over Pelion's shoulder, Drewson peered at the display. What is there that anyone would find interesting? I don't know, sir, Pelion gestured toward the screen. I was hoping I might find a clue here, but so far nothing's jumping out at me. Drewson grunted. What about the computer search you've been doing? He asked, lowering his voice. Any luck? Not yet, sir, Pelion said, wincing a little. He thought his search had been more discreet than that. But I've only made it through the top 3 data tiers. There are at least 4 more to go, plus the obscure single-system ones that are already half legend. But that doesn't make any sense, Drewson insisted. Someone with Lord attached to his name should be right there in the top tier. Yet you say he's not? So where exactly does he get his title from? Possibly one of the smaller systems, Pelion said. Some of those are very big on titles and general pageantry. Maybe. Drewson lowered his voice still further. What do you think of him, Commander? Can he be trusted? I hardly think my opinion matters, sir, Pelion said carefully. Someone in authority clearly trusts him. Maybe, Drewson said again. Well, I suppose we'll have to see how matters unfold. Are the watch reports finished? Yes, sir, I believe so. Good. Drewson turned and stalked through the archway into the main bridge. Pelion was still trying to find something interesting in the Poln system when the turbolift door once again opened and the masked, robed figure of Lord Odo swept onto the bridge. Commander Pelion, he said, greeting Pelion briefly as he turned to look down the command walkway at the stars filling the viewport. I gave orders to leave as soon as the Salaban's Hope was aboard. The delay was my decision, my lord, Drewson said, reappearing through the archway. I wanted to make sure your errand had been successful before we left the region. It was, Odo assured him coolly. Equipment you required has been brought aboard? Drewson persisted. It has, Odo said. You will speak to the helm now. Drewson seemed to draw himself up. Helm, he called. Engage new course setting. Activate hyperdrive. Acknowledged, the faint call came back. Across the bridge, the stars exploded into star lines, and the Chimera was on its way. Thank you. Deliberately, Odo walked over to the captain, stopping bare centimeters from him. The next time I give you an order, Captain, he said, his voice low but curiously carrying. I expect it to be carried out. Drewson's lip twitched, but to his credit he stayed where he was instead of backing up. Understood, my lord, he said. For a long moment, Odo held his pose. Then he turned his mask back to Pelion. I believe your watch is over, Commander Pelion, he said. You may go about your other activities. Pelion looked at Drewson. Technically, only the captain had the authority to dismiss the senior bridge officer from his watch, but Drewson had apparently had enough confrontation for one day. His head bopped once, then jerked microscopically toward the turbolift. Yes, my lord, Pelion said. Stepping a bit gingerly past the robed figure, he headed to the turbolift and escaped. He was nearly to his quarters when his comlink signaled. Commander, this is Lieutenant Tibale, Duty Security Officer, the caller identified himself. As per your standing order, I wish to inform you that Lord Odo's pilot has left his quarters and is currently in the Bay Officer's mess. Thank you, Pelion said, and keyed off. Returning the comlink to its holder, he reset the turbolift's destination. Odo had told him to go about his other activities. He'd never said those activities couldn't involve a meal. Chimera's various mess rooms always did a brisk business in the first hour after a watch change, but Soro's civilian outfit made him stand out of a crowd. He was sitting alone at a two-person table against the rear bulkhead. Working his way through the crowd, Pelion reached his side. "Good day, Master Soro," he said. "May I join you?" Soro looked up from his tray, and it seemed to Pelion that his lines around his eyes were hardened a bit. "Commander Pelion, isn't it?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Yes," Pelion confirmed. "May I join you?" Soro's eyes flicked to Pelion's empty hands, then back up to his face. "If you're looking for information about our mission, you'll have to ask Lord Odo. I'm just the pilot." "And I'm just the third bridge officer," Pelion reminded him. "Mission coordination is Captain Druson's job, not mine. I simply wanted to talk to you for a few moments." Soro shook his head. "Sorry, I'm not really in the mood for company." He returned his attention to his food. Pelion stayed where he was, and after a few more bites Soro looked up again. "Didn't you hear me?" he growled. "Go away." "My ship, Master Soro, not yours," Pelion reminded him. "What are you afraid of?" "I didn't say I was afraid," Soro countered. "I said I wasn't interested in company." "Then you picked the wrong job," Pelion said. "Bringing an Imperial Lord aboard an Imperial Star Destroyer guarantees you lots of company." For another handful of seconds Soro glared up at him. Pelion returned the gaze, neither moving nor speaking. With a sigh, Soro lowered his eyes. "It's said that patience is a virtue, Commander," he said, waving at the chair across from him. "So is persistence. What did you want to talk about?" "Nothing mysterious or ominous, I assure you," Pelion said as he sat down. "I mostly wanted to inquire as to whether you and Lord Odo were being treated properly. Your quarters, for instance. Are they satisfactory?" "Lord Odo hasn't complained," Soro said. "They're certainly no better or worse than one would expect to find on a warship." "Hardly what you and his lordship are used to, though, I assume," Pelion suggested. Soro looked down at his tray. "I've seen worse," he said. "I can't speak for his lordship." "Ah," Pelion said. "My mistake. I was under the impression that you were Lord Odo's permanent pilot." Soro shook his head. "Nothing about my life is permanent anymore," he said in a low voice. "Nothing permanent, nothing stable." He opened his right hand and gazed into the palm, as if there was some clue or memory there that only he could see. "Nothing pleasant." "I'm sorry," Pelion said. "So then Lord Odo merely brought you along for this particular job?" Soro's lip twitched. "You could say that." He gazed into his hand for another second, then closed it into a tired-looking fist. "Have you ever lost everything, Commander Pelion?" "No. Stupid question. Of course you've never lost everything." "Not everything, no," Pelion said. "But I've had my fair share of losses." "What, promotions?" Soro scoffed. "The last dessert cube in the mess line?" "Battles," Pelion said evenly. "Subordinates, comrades, friends." Soro's throat tightened. "Yes, I suppose you have," he said, gesturing to Pelion's uniform. "But at least you have your priorities straight." He opened his hand and again gazed into it. "Not everyone does." "No, they don't," Pelion agreed. "But it's never too late for a man to recognize his shortcomings and change them." Soro shook his head. "I wish that was true. But it isn't. Not always." "Yes, it is," Pelion said firmly. "Where there's life, there's a hope of change." Soro snorted. "Please." "Neat, cliched phrases never solve anything." "Not if they remain nothing but neat, cliched phrases," Pelion said. "They have to spark regret, resolve, and action." Abruptly, the mess room chatter around them vanished into a taut silence. Frowning, Pelion looked up. Lord Odo was standing just inside the doorway, his masked face pointed at Pelion and Soro. "My lord," Soro said hastily, starting to get to his feet. Odo made a small gesture, and Soro broke off the movement, sinking down again into his seat. "May I help you, Lord Odo?" Pelion asked, standing up. My quarters are being changed, Commander Pelion, Odo said. If he was annoyed to find one of the Chimera's officers having a private conversation with his pilot, it wasn't audible in his voice. I wished Soro's assistance. Of course, my lord, Soro said it, again starting to get up. But since he's in the middle of a meal, Odo continued, smoothly, perhaps you could assist me, Commander. Pelion hesitated. Moving trunks and equipment was hardly something a senior officer should be doing. Odo surely knew that. On the other hand, this might be Pelion's best chance of getting a look at things Odo had brought aboard the Chimera. Not to mention the chance to speak privately with Lord Odo himself. I would be honored, my lord, he said, stepping away from a table. Excellent, Odo said. His mask turned slightly. When you're finished, Soro, make your way to the bridge. They'll direct you to our new quarters. Pelion waited until he and Odo were walking along the corridor before speaking again. May I ask what the problem is with your quarters? There's no problem, Odo assured him. Now that we're en route to our final destination, and will have no need for quick access to Basalaban's Hope, I wish to be closer to the bridge. Captain Drewson has therefore assigned us a new quarters there. Pelion felt his stomach tighten. The only quarters available near the bridge were for visiting dignitaries, sector governors, grand moffs, or special imperial agents like Darth Vader. I'm sure you will find them more convenient, he murmured. Indeed, Odo said. What do you think of him? Pelion frowned. Who? My pilot, of course, Odo said. You were interrogating him, weren't you? Not at all, Pelion said hastily. Ironically enough, I'd been asking him if your quarters were satisfactory. Indeed, Odo said. You may have noticed Soro's deep unhappiness. It was a bit hard to miss, Pelion conceded. What exactly happened to him? He didn't tell you? Just vague hints, Pelion said. He asked if I'd ever lost everything. What exactly did he lose? As he said, everything. For a few steps, Odo was silent. Tell me, Commander, have you ever heard the saying, the choices of one shape the futures of all? Yes, I believe so, Pelion said. Jedi, isn't it? The Jedi may have stolen it, Odo said, but it was originally from the Song of Salaban. The point is that each person's decisions affect everyone around them. Friends, family, business associates, even total strangers. You ask what happened to Soro? That's what happened. He made bad decisions, many of them. In the process, he lost everything he held of value. I'm sorry, Pelion murmured. What will he do now? That's entirely up to him, Odo said. I rather hope he decides to fight to get it back. He motioned toward his cabin's door. In here. Odo's original rooms were a set of junior officers' quarters, with 2 beds, a refresher station, and a few small pieces of furniture. The 5 travel cases the Chimera's crewers had brought across from the Salaban's Hope were already clustered together on a floating repulsor cart in the center of the room. And in the middle of the group of bags were 2 new items. A pair of meter-long cylinders about 15 centimeters across, with long shoulder straps attached. The specialized equipment, apparently, that Odo had brought back from Runa. Stepping to the cart, Odo retrieved the cylinders from among the bags. You will guide the cart, Commander, he said, gesturing to the cart's control panel. As you wish, my lord, Pelion said, as he keyed the cart off standby. You can put those back if you wish, he added, nodding at the cylinders. The cart can handle the entire load. I know that, Odo said, looping one strap around each of his shoulders. Follow me. The rest of the trip to the command section was made of silence. Most of the junior officers they passed seemed a bit startled at the sight of a senior bridge officer driving a cart, but none of them said anything. The crewers, in contrast, studiously ignored the odd procession as being none of their business. One lone petty officer was brave enough, or conscientious enough, to offer his assistance, and though Odo turned him down, Pelion made sure to memorize the man's face and duty sector. The next promotions list would be opening soon for officer recommendations. As Pelion had anticipated, Odo had led them to the visiting dignitary suite 2 corridors aft of the bridge. What Pelion hadn't expected was that Captain Drusen would be waiting there for them. "Lord Odo," the captain said, his eyes flashing oddly at Pelion as he bowed to Odo. "Thank you for your willingness to move your quarters. I'm sure you'll find these more than satisfactory." "I'm certain I will, Captain," Odo said, looking around the room, his eyes lingering for a moment on the display and repeater board, which the occupant could use to monitor nearly all of the Chimera's systems. Commander Pelion was kind enough to assist with the move. "So I see," Drusen said, giving Pelion the same odd look. "I would have been happy to assign you a crewer instead." "I was more than happy to offer my assistance," Pelion said. "Yes," Drusen murmured, his gaze dropping from Pelion's face to the cluster of bags on the cart. "But I'm sure we can handle things from here. Dismissed." "Yes, sir." Pelion inclined his head to Odo. "Lord Odo?" A minute later, he was on the turbolift heading back towards officers' country. Now would normally be the time for a meal, some reading, and then sleep. But today the meal and sleep would wait. Suddenly his brain was churning with possibilities. He still didn't know who or what Lord Odo was, but finally he had a fresh idea of where to look. "Here we go," Han muttered, and pushed back the hyperdrive levers. In front of him, the mottled hyperspace sky flashed with star lines, and then the stars of the Poln system. For a minute, he let the Falcon coast, heading generally inward as he studied the twin planets ahead. Even without their difference in size, it would have been easy to tell the two worlds apart. Poln Major was all shades of blue and green and white, with scattered clumps of glittering lights on the night side. Poln Major was mostly browns and greys, with a bare handful of lights. Probably the entrances to various spaceports, he decided, or else the markers of underground storage and maintenance facilities. And if Riken was right, the holes were where a whole lot of smugglers, pirates, and other fringe types were hiding. Beside him, Chewie rumbled. "Yeah, I see it," Han said sourly, eyeing the flashing lights of the Golan 1 space defense station, in high orbit over Poln Minor. Riken had assured him that the Golan was mostly an empty shell these days, running with maybe 30% of its normal crew and rated firepower. But even 30% of a Golan was still as serious an obstacle as any for the Alliance forces trying to move in. On the other hand, if it could be taken intact, the same firepower would be on the Alliance's side. He made a mental note to suggest that Axlon make the station one of his demands to Governor Feroz. There was a second sound of footsteps behind him. "Are we there?" Axlon asked. "Yeah," Han confirmed, setting his teeth firmly together. 4 days of riding together in a cramped light freighter. 4 days of the man finding a way to get on every single one of Han's nerves had left him with a powerful urge to open up the hatch to clean the air. Or maybe just find a convenient piece of vacuum and toss his passenger into it. Axlon was polite, but in a subtly superior way that even her worshipfulness, Princess Leia, couldn't match. He asked obvious and irritating questions, and continually gave the impression that Han should be happier about answering to them. He was an avid but unskilled sabacc player, and every time he lost it was clear that he thought Han had cheated, even when he hadn't. But worse even than all the surface irritants was what was simmering beneath the man's eyes. There was a swirl of anger, tenacity, and nervousness back there, in a fluid and ever-changing combination that set Han's teeth on edge. He'd seen that kind of personality before, and it usually got the offender and his pals chased out of a cantina, or off-world at a high-speed rate, or it got them all killed. Chewie had noticed it too, even though the big Wookiee was too polite to mention it. Still, when something bothered Chewie, Han had long ago learned it was worth keeping an eye on. Chewie rumbled again. "What?" Han asked, snapping out of his reverie. Chewie repeated the comment, this time pointing to the aft sensor readout. Han frowned. The Wookiee was right. There was a Z-59 back there, about half a minute behind the Falcon and 20 degrees to starboard. There are still plenty of Z-95s running around in the galaxy, especially out here at the edges where security services couldn't afford newer fighters or didn't want to put the more expensive hardware at risk. And the ship was definitely not showing Alliance markings. But it was coming in on more or less the same vector as the Falcon, though that 20-degree spread meant the pilot was trying not to look like it was coming in on the same vector. And something about the way the pilot was handling the fighter strongly reminded Han of Luke. Han felt his eyes narrow. Riken had told him that Luke was going to be handling some of the follow-up fighter stuff, but Riken didn't exactly have a spotless record as far as lying through his teeth was concerned. And now Han thought about it. He remembered that when he and Axelon had said goodbye to Luke, the kid had been pretty vague about what he was going to be doing for the next few weeks. Chewie rumbled. Yeah, I see him, Han said. See who? Axelon said, a little too quickly. Chewie was just wondering about the Golan out there, Han said, casually easing the Falcon to the right. If that really is Luke out there, he wouldn't want Han getting close enough to get a clear look at him through the canopy. Sure enough, Han had barely begun to close the gap when the Z-95 started a drift of its own, heading in the same direction and at the same speed as the Falcon. Muttering under his breath, Han drifted the Falcon back to their original vector. This time the Z-95 didn't try to match the maneuver, but simply continued easing to starboard, as if that had been the pilot's plan all along. Even Luke wasn't inexperienced enough at this sort of thing to look like he was trying to play follow my twist with the Falcon, especially when he was obviously trying to keep his presence a secret here. Him, Riken, and everyone else. Including Axelon? So it's just the three of us, huh? Han commented. 3 against the whole Imperial garrison. Oh, please, Axelon scoffed. It's hardly going to come to that. Don't you get it? Governor Feroz wants us here. He's not going to do anything to jeopardize this deal. Yeah, Han muttered. Right.